We want to welcome Lamont Wilcox to the podcast today. He's the creator of the NAAP system. Do you want to kind of explain who you are and what this system is?
Yeah, sure. So neuro-auto-associative programming is what NAAP stands for, and it's a system that utilizes the concepts behind the NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming.
And people, I think, are more familiar with that for sure.
Yeah, that's something that you would be able to find a lot of information about. It's been around since, early 80s, actually, to some extent. It's evolved quite a bit, but NLP is actually the ability to reprogram how the mind functions, and how it reasons. So the basic concept is that the maps of our mind and the way that we see this world and the way that we function in this world and respond to this world is based off of the maps of our mind that have been created through our life experiences. And that way of thinking is all we have access to because of the way that we think. And so when we have experiences, the way that we respond to those experiences and ultimately the way that our brain uses, or the parts of our brain that participate in an activity, are based off of those maps of our thinking. And so I'm lucky enough to use and apply that in a situation in a neuro clinic where we have people that actually have physiological struggles from having trauma or car accidents or things that have happened to their head that kind of take it to a different level. So the NLP side of it is the basis, but because I work with people with such severe issues and mental struggles, I've incorporated a lot of science around, a lot of neuroscience that's come to our knowledge in the past, 4 or 5 or so years, just very recent discoveries. And there's been a lot. We especially our country, back in Obama's time, he recognized and was presented with the statistics around mental illness and the exponential path that we were on. And so he created what's called the BRAIN Initiative. And BRAIN is an acronym for a description of discovering and learning more about the brain. And we've since put over $950 million as a country into the research around the brain. And so all of the universities, schools, and any entity that's studying the brain has been able to get these massive grants to help them learn. And so that has created a massive amount of discovery and knowledge and ability to watch the brain and see how the brain works. And that is now available. There's tons and tons, almost an endless amount of new knowledge around the brain. And so what I do with Dr. Oliver is we use that new knowledge to create new things to actually do something with what we now know about the brain. And neuro-auto-associative programming is taking what NLP did to reprogram someone to actually help them create or have a deeper understanding of how their own brain works so that they can start to take charge of what's happening in their brain. If you talk to anyone who's struggling with any kind of mental thing or an addiction or a habit that they can't overcome, they'll explain that they're stuck. They're not really sure what to do. They can't. It's an understanding that they need. It's a new perspective that they need. And so a typical NLP practitioner would bring someone in. They would use language to help them have a new perspective about something they're struggling with. So for example, someone who wants to overcome an addiction to smoking, for example, they would help them reassociate the ways that they perceive and reason in life, the ways that their brain has set that up so that they could now see it like similar to someone who doesn't smoke. In other words, their reasoning would change around taking that action and those habits that they have. And then that person would be able to really quite quickly change their behavior because their way of thinking around it has changed. So that person would walk out of the office and have a new perspective that would help them so that they wouldn't have a desire to smoke anymore. Literally, oftentimes stopping in that moment from a pattern and a habit that has been habitual for 10, 20, and 30 years.
Well, something like that, how does the mental side of things differ from the physical? Because like smoking can be a physical habit as well. Their body, is addicted to it physically. Is the brain able to overcome that so much that the physical doesn't exist anymore?
Yeah, that is a great question. So that's part of what we're learning about the brain, is the power that the brain has to take over so many physical processes in our brain, biochemical responses, and learning, and someone being able to come to a deeper understanding of those particulars around their brain and what it's doing is what is a big part of what empowers them to start to make change. Because so much of what we're experiencing are rooted in our process in our brain. Physiological experiences that we have are rooted and triggered by our brain. So for example, someone who has PTSD, that's a really common one. PTSD is also kind of the standalone part that starts so many other mental struggles.
Right. And it's a big buzzword right now. Everything is just, it's like they have something happen, they get scared. I'm going to have PTSD from that, kind of
yeah,
thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of a buzzword now.
Yeah. And so we can have two people that have the same exact experience. Like let's say someone in the military that's in a war and they're in a manhole and they're both have the same exact
both are
experience.
Together, right?
Yeah, so they have let's say a grenade comes into their foxhole and they both jump out and try to escape, but both are injured, right? And the way that they respond to that, now one of them can walk away and have this PTSD that really disrupts their life and makes it difficult to have relationships and to keep a job and to stay focused, and all these things just really makes their life miserable. And the other person can walk away and not only have a normal life, but even better than a normal life, and even take from that experience something that builds and lifts who they are and their capabilities in their mind. And the difference between those two is the preset framework within their mind of how they see this world and how their brain will respond to that world. And then as the brain responds, it creates the physiological experience that they then have, and therefore affecting the chemicals and all these different balances. Because people keep looking at what the brain is doing after someone has these mental illnesses, and they say, well, the brain this, and it does that, and it does this. But what's important is what started it. What is it that, where did it come from?
Most people don't think of the background to get them to that point.
Yeah.
So with your system, does that help them go in and like change these presets then that you're talking about? Is that what it does?
Exactly. So that's what I was getting to, is that a typical NLP practitioner will use that to help somebody change a specific habit, like one type of habit. What I'm doing is I'm using the same concept in NLP to help someone gain a new perspective about the functioning of their brain and their ability to control it, so that they begin this path of perpetual and consistent change in their brain. It's almost like in the brain, when you look at the brain, a mental illness looks the same as an addiction. It is an addiction. It's a confusion in the brain of the reward system. So the brain has this basic reward system that it runs off of. And when someone gets in a perpetual habit that gets them things that they don't really want on a conscious level, their subconscious is caught in a pattern of kind of like a confusion of the reward system. So what this does is it clarifies their reward system so that on a conscious level, they can start to affect their subconscious patterns.
And they don't realize, you're basically getting to the reason of why they're self-sabotaging.
Yes. And that's where self-sabotage comes. It's self-sabotage, but it's really your subconscious sabotaging your conscious. And so then they're not getting along. They're not communicating well. They're very much not communicating well.
And then because of that, you have a disharmony. And whenever you have a disharmony, you have downstream effects.
Yes. And so, and what's amazing about it is that it's a really quick process. So I'll now quick as in it's not months. Typically, it's a matter of fact, oftentimes it's one intensive session. So it might be 6 to 8 hours where
Holy
someone
cow.
comes in.
So it's not just a 30 minutes or an hour kind of thing.
No. And the way I see it is very little can really be accomplished from my perspective in that amount of time. But, and I take people who, you know, that have ADHD and they're very impatient and they're like, oh, I don't think I can sit there for, you know, that I can't sit there for 2 hours, let alone 6 or 7. But at the end of 7 hours, they're asking for more and they're excited and they can't believe what time it is and the time all just passed. And there is no hypnosis involved, but but their brain starts to discover these things that it's wanted so badly for so long that it just starts to take it in. They just love it. It's a really, I'm going to say it's a miraculous experience. So recently with a client of mine who went to serve a 2-year LDS mission, who struggled with the depression and anxiety and suicidal ideations and really was too much for them to handle and had to send home. And he came home and he went and did typical therapy and tried all these different things. And he said it just didn't make a difference. And I got to go visit with his whole family, an extended family, and a group that he put together so I could talk to them. And he stood up and shared his experience. And he said, he goes, it changed me so much that I don't have depression at all. I have hard days every once in a while, but not depression. I rarely struggle, and I'm excited about life, and I have all these goals and things that I'm moving towards and excitement about life and what I'm doing. It just completely changed his life. And it really does that for the majority of the people I see. And I get to see people with some pretty severe struggles. And it is really powerful.
So how did you come up with this whole concept? Like, what's your background a little bit?
Yeah, so I actually, this is something that I kind of self-discovered. I had a lot of people in my life and struggles that I had, and people that were close to me that had some really quite severe mental personality disorder and mental struggles and illnesses, and had tried all kinds of things with medications and therapies and you know, all kinds of the things that most people would think of.
The standard stuff.
Yeah. And I ran into this concept of neurolinguistic programming, and I started to study into that, and it just sat really, really strong. And I have a very high, what I call it, a very high level of fulfillment with feeding my curiosity. So I started to research really well and really get into the research, and to the point where I started to understand my brain enough that I switched my own way of thinking to the point where I was able to break out of my normal, you know, living of a 9-to-5 job, let go of that, start a small business so I could make a bunch of money so I wouldn't have to work as much. I made a bunch of money in a really short period of time doing something completely different than I'd ever done. My thought process was to take that time that I would make to study and research more. So I literally spent thousands of hours after that on a daily basis, just 10, 15 hours a day, just researching and looking and finding what people were discovering in the brain and learning neuroscience and learning about psychology and all the different things discovered, new things that have discovered about psychology, and people who've taken NLP to a whole new level, and just started doing that. And then I started helping the people around me. And if you talk to most therapists, they'll say, yeah, they never work with family or friends. It's too complicated.
Well, I'll be honest. I think most people that are in psychology are kind of whacked themselves. They're all my professors that were psychology. I mean, it seems like they've all kind of gone into that. They're all whacked themselves and trying to figure out themselves.
Yeah.
And people, when I say that, they all kind of chuckle because everyone kind of, yeah, that's about right.
You know, it's very interesting because most people who do get into this do it because they struggle. I struggled myself, and similar to what they did, I went after it looking, but I went at the right time when there was so much research available. There was so much. I heard one neuroscientist say, if you start reading articles today, you would never get through them all because there's so much coming in, there's so much knowledge. And psychology has massively changed. I mean, the core concepts of much of psychology's theories and methods have been debunked. I mean, really switched around and changed.
I mean, honestly, with straight psychology, that follows the 1/3. 1/3 do the same, 1/3 get better, and 1/3 get worse. There's all their numbers are pretty, the 33%, you know,
Yeah.
It's luck of the draw. I mean, that's a kind of a profession that I don't think is really moving forward and having better success.
Yeah, and if you look at the statistics, it's not working.
And psychiatrists, really, all they do is just pharmacology.
Yeah, and I look at what I've done in the last year, and I've helped over 100 people, and I've met with most of them once or twice, and every once in a while a little follow-up here and there. But it's just such a quicker method, and the one of the most amazing things is it's the basis of how the brain works, and so it's applicable to every psychological situation, every mental struggle there is. This same model applies. So I can take someone with all the different things, and my focus is the same thing. I help them walk through the process of understanding their brain at a deeper level, using their thought processes and their language to get them there, so that they start to get on this path of completely different thinking. I mean, when they walk out of this office, they see the world as a different thing. It's not the same to them. And I tell them that when they walk in. I say, when you walk out this door, it is not going to look the same. This world and your life and all your past and everything is going to look different to you. It's going to seem like a different thing, and it's going to have a different value to you. And it does, and it changes their lives. It is amazing. I am so blessed. I feel so lucky to be in this situation. And I look back at all the suffering and the difficulty that I went through myself with my own people close to me and myself, and I see all that, and that seems kind of horrific. But now I look at it and I am so grateful that it happened, because it drove me to where I'm at now, of being able to help people. And I get to come in every day and I get to change people's lives in such a miraculous way that I ask for more trials. I ask for more difficulties in my own thinking and in my own mind and my own perspectives, because I value them so much for what they've done for me already. So it is.
When there's a lot of people that are new to this, they don't know. Yeah. They don't know what NAAP is. They don't know all of this stuff. So what does a treatment kind of look like that they could experience when they come in? Like, what is it that they would go through? Or
are they laying on a couch?
Like, what is it that, because a lot of people are kind of, don't know what it is about. Can you kind of tell them what it is more about?
Yeah, so that's a great question.
The process of going through a treatment.
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, it's, as you can imagine, there's quite a range of severity, right? There's quite a range of difficulty level with each person. But the majority of people will go through a simple process. The first time that we meet, it would be what's called a clarity session. And what I'm doing is the things that I've studied is how to read what people's maps are like in their head currently. So what their life experiences have created in their thought processes, and how their subconscious processes and sees this world. And I collect that data, and then I help them see at the end of that. It's usually about an hour and a half session, an hour to an hour and a half. And at the end of that session, I show them, or I talk to them about some of the things that I've discovered about their brain and how it's going. And they always kind of, wow, you're right. How did you know that? Because the discussion is about things they like to do, and things that they have enjoyed in life, and their favorite things, and things they don't like, and activities that they try to avoid or try to experience that they and why they, and it's like a conversation, but the questions are a probing type of conversation that really makes their brain kind of go to places it hasn't been very much. A lot of whys, like why is this that way? Why does it think? And their brain is kind of like, I don't really know why. But the thing is, the subconscious does know why. And so I help them to kind of relax and let whatever comes to their mind from their lips, because that's what their subconscious is trying to say. And so I use that to help discover how I need to speak to their subconscious, really, their way of thinking. And then we set up what's called an intensive session. Usually, it depends on the person, but usually we set up what's called an intensive session, which is that sometimes 6 to even 7 or 8 hour.
So you start out with like an 1.5 to 2 hour session just to kind of get a base.
Yeah.
Then you do your next one. And
yes.
that can be as long, and that's basically as long as needed.
Yeah, and that one is determined by what I find in that clarity session. So sometimes it's an intensive, other times it might spread out and be different.
And then if they end up doing like a 3rd or a 4th session, are those usually like a lot shorter just because now you're just kind of fine tuning?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I call them booster sessions, because they get it and there's so much going on in their head. There's so many new things happening, and their brain is opening up to change, and it's just enjoying so much of it. And they go back into life and they start applying and using all this stuff, but there's oftentimes little parts that they kind of get stuck on, but their brain knows there's more. It's like, I know there's more. There's something more that there was to this, and I can't remember what it is. And so we do a booster session. It's usually about an hour to 2 hours for a booster session. And they usually and that's often 2 weeks to a month from the first session. And that usually is such a booster for them, because they also value the data so much more, the information so much more. They've applied and seen it and used it. And, and it's not like you have to go out and try hard. I'll explain. When I first started doing this, I didn't know it very well. But I wanted to help people. So I would just sit with people that I worked with, or friends or neighbors or anybody, and just kind of teach what I knew. And months later, after I'd spent so much more time studying and learning, I reached back to those people to say, hey, I really know what I'm doing now. And most of those people had overcome all of the difficulties we talked about. So the session isn't to get them to a perfect place, but it's to get them, and I provide so much more with that session that it's so much quicker. But all the little pieces and parts, they don't necessarily remember. So for example, I write things on a board. As I'm going through and teaching, I'm handwriting a bunch of things on the board, descriptive things and visualizations and different things that help them based off of their way of thinking. I match that up so that they start to take that in. And so even if they don't remember all the details, the change still happens in their head. They won't go back on that change. Even if they go back into their old environment, they go back to their old stresses and everything, it typically doesn't shift back, because I've covered it. It's like learning 1 + 1 and getting to calculus. You learn the 1 + 1 sticks so well by the time you get to calculus. It's just nature. And so I teach a lot more than they really carry with them when they walk out. But when they come back, they go back to those other details, and they really bring them in a lot stronger, and they just take it to a whole new level. So it's really.
So how can people work with you?
So there's a handful of things going on in my life right now. I am one of the founders of Living Well Project, and we are putting together an app that takes part in this process, so that everybody can have access to this.
Wow.
The Living Well Project, I've got some of the most technically capable people that are using technology that is almost unheard of right now to gather the information about people's experience and their personality, to help them to recognize what their activity, and specifically in the beginning, it'll be focused on social media and those kind of things, to help them kind of really start to begin that process. So that's a big part that's going to get the help to everybody eventually.
So
right now,
how do you anticipate that coming out?
That will probably be halfway through next year.
So June, July of 2020.
That's what we're hoping for.
Okay.
And we've been working on it for some time now, but it's coming around. And we actually it's called the Living Well Project is the name of the app is called Butterfly. Kind of represents the change that a caterpillar makes to a butterfly, and the colors and the fulfillment in life that come from that. And so we're hoping that will launch at least in a limited area mid next year. Right now we're collecting funds, we're collecting donations, and so we're looking for donors. And we have quite a few that are on board. Google has committed to $10,000 a month and giving us some of their resources and people to help with the app. And so that's kind of where we're aiming right now. We're putting together a website for people to make donations, and I should have that soon. We should be able to put that on a link. Yeah, so the Living Well Project, we should have a website up that you can go to donate, to learn more about, to watch a little video on what it does.
And what is that website?
We will have it soon.
Oh,
I
wait,
don't have the Living Well Project .org, but I'm not 100% sure yet. We'll get a
link and put it in the description.
Perfect. Yeah. I ultimately, I do not see a better way to donate your money than helping change mental illness in this country. They all want out of the traps that their mind is putting them in.
So we just have a couple of seconds left. So what, for you, if people want to get a hold of you, give us your info, give us your name, website, those things right now.
Yeah, so you can look up the neuroclinic.org/NAAP. So that will put you into my page of that website.
Okay.
Or you can contact me at 801-722-4936. You can shoot me a text.
Your clinic is in Alpine, right?
It's in Highland, actually.
Oh, Highland.
Or,
okay.
I'm sorry, it's almost in Highland, but it's Lehigh.
Oh, it is in Lehigh. Okay. I
knew
knew it was
technically in Lehigh, so just north side of Lehigh. So
did you have a special going on too for the audience?
Yeah, actually for this audience, so normally for that first clarity session, I charge $150, and it'd be $50 off for anybody that mentions this podcast.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for doing that.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate all you guys do.
We're trying, and we appreciate people such as yourself that are trying to get the word out that there's other alternatives to just popping pills to get well. And so what other venue it is that we all do, we're all trying to help people and give them an opportunity to look outside the box and to get well naturally. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, I love your podcast. Thank you.